an applied method of problem solving characterized by unbiased, honest attitude is intellectual honesty. In a nutshell, say what you mean what you say. Harvard ethicist Louis Guenin describes the kernel of intellectual dishonesty to be a virtuous disposition to eschew deception when given an incentive for deception. My guests today are friends of mine. I'm allowed to bring in friends who have diverse way of seeing the same picture as opposed to how I will see that picture. Let me start by introducing them, and I bet you will enjoy this conversational journey. Banke Ayanleke is the clinical lead at Pharmacy Services, Pediatrics and Neonates at Sheikh Khalifa Medical City, Abu Dhabi. She's also an academic board advisor to the Fatima College of Health and Sciences in Abu Dhabi likewise. Shaire is a chief commercial officer at Prosperous Holdings, a principal investment firm in Lagos, Nigeria. He's a chartered financial analyst and an investment banker. I'm looking forward to hear the views of these wonderful folks, and I look forward to what we can all learn from them today. I'm Bimbola, an energy analyst, business manager, and a data scientist, and I love spending time with friends and family when I'm not podcasting. Before I continue, I'd like to acknowledge the support of PaySop Invest, a global financial advisory and wealth management firm based in Germany, France, and Nigeria. If you're looking to create generational wealth and understand how to manage your finances, do contact the PaySop Invest team on their website and social media platforms. Today's topic is intellectual dishonesty. A rather broad topic, an abstract one at that, but it envelopes various issues. Our discussion today will include online social commentary, be it via WhatsApp, Twitter, Instagram, and the likes. So, let's begin. Now, permissions, a dichotomy between the days of old and modern times. These days, people feel entitled, if you're not careful, to you as a whole human being. I recall back in the day, if someone could, wanted Ife's phone number, for example, I would reach out to Ife and I would ask him first before I extend his number to whoever is asking. But these days, courtesy is a chore. So I've just used this as a simple example, but there are other areas of permissions. What do we allow ourselves to do? Who do we permit into our space? And who do we permit into our lives? So, Ife, since I already mentioned your name, what do you think about permissions?
Hi.
Hi. So tell us. Yeah.
And yeah, it's good to be here. Good to be here. And hello, Banke.
Hi, Ife.
Okay, so permissions, rather interesting conversation, and in the broader context of intellectual dishonesty and all of that. You see, I think as individuals, right? We meet all kinds of people every day, and we've got all kinds of people in our spaces coming in and out, right? And with the advent of social media and 24-hour connectivity across different platforms, I think that has blurred the lines somewhat. And so with respect to this whole idea of permissions, I think it requires us to be a little bit more deliberate, about the various interactions that we are having. Yeah. Obviously, it serves a purpose if doing that serves a purpose, right?
Yeah.
And a very simple example. We've as a parent, for instance, for the longest time, whilst we're younger, Our parents tell us be careful, don't talk to strangers, and all of those things, right? And then gradually, I believe it's in the late 90s, early 2000s, that all of this technology probably, reduced the distance between people. And suddenly, the man on the street or woman on the street who used to be the stranger is now somebody who posts a comment under something that you've put online. And we've seen how, in many instances, teenagers or even younger children have, in quotes, met strangers online, but because naive or they don't know better, they've had gone on to make those interactions and meet in person, and then we've got all these instances.
Efe, we may have lost you. Are you there?
I think you might have just
in our lives, right? Need to be deliberate about what those relationships serve, and of course that will then dictate to what extent, right, they've got access, and to what extent we feed those relationships as well as nurture them,
Okay, thanks. We lost you for about maybe 5 seconds or so, but it's fine. I think we did get
That's going to happen a lot.
It was quite short. It was not a long.
Some people will say this is the challenge of living in the third world.
Because it is.
I won't name names.
Oh, we don't care.
So, Banke, what are your thoughts on permissions? On the back of what Ife has, said, he's quite right with, the advent of technology and whereby someone on the road, abstractly, anyone can just suddenly become, make comments under a photo on Instagram, for example, or the ability to just be added to the same WhatsApp group, and the person feels just right next to you. What are your thoughts?
I think with that, I'm just very much aware of the fact that these are the times we're living in, and I think if you look at all those occurrences in the context of the changing times, it's less of an intrinsic problem for me. You know what I mean? If people would have access to that information by clicking on the internet, like maybe in my mobile phone, for example, the whole of the UAE can get access to it. I'm not going to be really...
Speaking, so I can hear.
Oh, right.
You can... Oh, really? I can. Can you hear now? Efe, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
But you can't hear Banke?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. What I'll suggest is, did you hear Banke before, previously?
When she got on, yes.
Okay,
let's try again.
Politely said hello.
So you still can't hear me now?
Efe, can you hear now?
No.
No. Okay.
Can you come in back?
What I'll suggest is, if you can join back in with your phone, that's a possibility.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can join back in with your phone, and
we'll wait for you.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
I can hear him though. That's strange.
It's very strange. I can hear you clearly, and I can hear him. And what's interesting is he can't hear you. I don't know how that's. Let's
wait for him to join again.
Yes. It's interesting.
Because it's only gonna work if you can hear me.
Efe.
I'm going to join in now.
Okay.
I can't hear her, so I'm going to go off and then come again.
Yeah. Okay.
Because what I'm about to say is very exciting, so you need to hear it, okay?
Whatever she said, my village people are protecting me from her.
Oh my goodness. This is a case of village people protecting. I love that.
Bless them. My view on permission is very intrinsic, but I'll wait for Ife. It's interesting.
Yeah, because based on what he also said, it's very true. You know, you're literally a WhatsApp group or an Instagram comment or Twitter comment away from someone that is, 1,000 miles away from where you are.
Yeah.
You know,
but they don't need your permission. That's another thing for you to realize, and that's your responsibility to
especially when you're right, or when you decide to make your profile a public profile, right? Yeah. Efe, can you hear us now? Can you hear me?
I can hear both of you loud and clear.
Oh, fantastic. Now you can hear my abuse. Okay, so where were we? Right. Okay, so on the back of what Efe said, right? Okay. Yeah, so like I said, I think it helps me personally. The way I deal with it is, if that information that someone is asking of me, or I find they are in possession of, is something they could have gotten anyway, I'm not going to be too bothered about it. So it's very important that you actually understand the context within which you're existing. So the times, the fact that there's technology, the fact of what you do, if you're a public figure, blah, blah, blah. So that's one aspect. So I guess whether I get offended by it or I find it intrusive is how I view that person and how I view how they've acquired it. If I feel like it's just a case of you're not being very respectful, I can address that. And if I actually see permission in the first place, for the longest of time, I stopped seeing permission as a very outward thing. It's extremely intrinsic for me. It's often about, what am I giving myself permission for? If I find something intrusive, I've given myself permission to express it to that person that I find it intrusive. Now, what that means is, every time you look at permission as an intrinsic thing, something that you have to permit yourself, like that autonomy, you're also taking responsibility for the consequences of that. So if I'm going to look at someone and say, well, you were a bit rude, I'm prepared to be confrontational. So whatever comes from that, I'm going to have to live with it. I think the reason a lot of people don't give themselves permission to do things, to live a certain life, to catch a break, to do certain things, is because they don't want to take responsibility. Because as children, we ask for permission from our parents, because then they can be responsible for the decisions, right? And as an adult, you have to take permission. No, you don't. But you find yourself needing to take permission, either because you can't be decisive or you want that to be someone else's responsibility. So yeah, I look at permission in a very different way. It actually allows me to manage my emotions, because I think to myself, is this something that I want to do? I give myself permission to do it. Is it something I want someone else to do for me? I give myself permission to request that aspect from that person. If I feel, oh, Ife's back. Ife, are you back with us?
I am.
Do you want us to do this segment again? I think we'll have to do this segment again. Okay, I hope you won't disconnect again. Let's try again.
Yeah, go ahead.
So where were you? Where were you up to, Ife? Where should I start?
Intrinsic was the last thing I heard.
Okay. Right. So I was just saying to Bimbo that I view permission in a very intrinsic way. I stopped viewing it from an outsider's point of view quite a few years ago. And by that, I mean that I often just ask myself, what am I giving myself permission to do? I'm giving myself permission to how I feel, how I respond to stimuli, how I catch a break, and even choose my responsibilities at times. And that's really how I view permission, because in our formative years, like you said, we as children, we would ask for permission for a lot of things because we wanted someone else to guide us. But they were also taking responsibility for that situation that they were permitting us to do. And I honestly think that the reason a lot of us don't give permission to ourselves is because we're lazy and we don't want to accommodate the fact that we're going to be responsible for the consequences of that permission. And that's really how I've navigated permission. I've really looked at it as, I'm going to allow myself to label this relationship. If I want to call you an acquaintance, as opposed to a friend, I will do that. If I want to go to that party, I will do that. If I want to decline an invitation, I will do that. If I feel like your comment under my post is something untoward and you don't deserve to speak to me in that manner, I might do that. Or I might decide to walk away because I've reasoned it to the fact that it's a public space and I'm not in control of that. So yeah, permission for me is very much about, taking responsibility in the things we allow ourselves to do, not so much of what we are being permitted to do.
Interesting. So, Banke, would you then say, I hear you, I hear all what you've said, and you're bang on the money. Would you then say permission can also be people pleasing?
Absolutely, because if you think about it, for people that are adults, that are not children, that find themselves in a perpetual complex of constantly having to seek permission to take a rest, permission to decline invitation, what else would motivate you from not being able to give yourself a chance to say no? Because no is a complete sentence, because you're trying to please people. It's hard to sit with because it questions everything else that you might be like to tell yourself, but it's people pleasing at the best of times. Because if you weren't trying to please people, you will give yourself a bit of a chance, a lot more actually. If you wanted to zip line, you would do it, not caring whether it looks irresponsible or not. If you wanted to take a nap, you would do it.
Interesting. Efe?
Yeah, I quite agree with what Banke has said, and I guess she's raised some interesting views, right? So the lens through which we look at this thing, making it inward, and for a second, it reminded me of a book I had read some time ago that talked about freedom and how freedom is a burden, and this is to the point of Banke saying that people are
sorry,
lazy,
can you guys hear me, or do I have to join again?
No, we can hear you.
If
it's speaking now.
Right.
Oh no, we can hear you. Yeah,
okay,
we're fine. Yeah.
And if you're going to navigate this whole issue of permissions and the like, it requires a certain level of deliberateness, right? And almost depending on how far you want to take it, you almost need to put a number of things in certain buckets, right? And just that whole process of exercising your choice and the freedom to choose, right? In itself, I think it brings a responsibility that many people actually would rather shy away from.
Absolutely.
Because at some point in time, you would then need to, and depending if you're also dealing with someone who's also deliberating themselves and says, okay, why haven't you done this, or why have you chosen to do this way, right? And then it's not confrontation, but it's just an opportunity to engage, and someone wants to understand how you've reasoned this whole thing out, be it a relationship or a pattern that they've noticed with your life and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I think many of us would rather not.
And I think also we've not been groomed to do so, right? I think the way we've been raised, I always discuss with people, like my parents, especially my dad, always sort of put the ball in your court, where it was always a very consultative way of raising myself. You could always come to the table and debate things. So you were always responsible for the consequences of your decision, right? But a lot of parents don't do that. So they basically tell us things to do. So we go ahead and do it the way they've said. And then if it goes pear-shaped, you can kind of blame them. But I think maybe if we retrace our steps and give more autonomy from an earlier age, or at least make the conscious effort to carry the people along with the decisions they're having to make, the decision-making process, people would know that autonomy comes with responsibility as well as consequence, ultimately,
Interesting. Nice. So I'm enjoying this because I obviously learning a whole lot of views from both of you, what permissions can look like. So still, not on permissions now, but segueing right to something that tends to seemingly seem like permission for women to progress, permission for anyone really to get to a certain level or to go beyond even an expected level, especially if you find yourself in a place where it may not be your natural habitat. For example, if you live in the West and you are from Africa, for example, So this takes me to my next question, which is, which falls within the breaking of, the usual term breaking the glass ceiling. What is a glass ceiling? Is there a glass ceiling for women? Is there one for Black women? I don't understand. Banke, tell us.
Well, I think this really typifies...
Naturally, she should go first.
I should, right? Because if we let you, you might not let me. Right. Do you know, it's, I think, apart from taking gender bias by the neck of itself, this is one of those topics that allows you to see intellectual dishonesty in its prime, because you will have people let you know that, one, they don't believe that there's a glass ceiling for women or women of color, and you might actually be convinced, because they will come with data, because every time people come with statistics, they must be right? And what they will say to you is, well, especially if you take the UK, for example, they'll talk about the Equal Pay Act, which is what, mid-70s? So it's like 50 years old. They'll be like, good strides have been made to make sure that you can go as far as you want to go to. Look at what's happening. We're having a lot of appointments in executive positions. A lot of women are on the boards. A lot of people on the C-suite. They will tell you everything. And they might be right, because they're going to come with data. But you experience it, right? You know for a fact, if you're in STEM, for example, no one needs to tell you, especially if you felt it. You know the fact that there are certain positions that will not come to you until Mr. Smith retires, right? It's just the way it is, right? And our reality is such that I became an expat at a very young age, right? So I'm having positions that I knew no one had to tell me. And it causes some sort of imposter syndrome in you. I knew there was no way I was going to get that in the south of England, because I just wasn't, the demographic was wrong. So glass ceiling does exist for women. It's as simple as this. Certain professions, like my husband is an architect. I have people in law. Certain professions mean if you don't have a certain name, okay, if you're not from a certain socioeconomic class, we really need to question why you even chose that career in the first place. Because, you know the trajectory is going to be skewed because of the demographic you fall into. And if people say that that's not true, then they have to live within, like, they have to exist as you do. So I think it exists. I think the limit placed on you in a professional sector as to what you can achieve, the grade you can move up to, is limited. And the fact that it's contrived, right? The society makes it so, makes you not even be able to question it. And that's the most difficult thing about it. You're doing everything right, but you know you can't get to that grade. You can't even ask for it because there will be justifications as to why it isn't so, and you will get to question yourself. And I think that the systems are made such that you can see how they're trying to mitigate it. You see the quota, you see the positive discrimination, if we can even use that word, to make sure that we're increasing the number of women in certain sectors, into certain levels, and that's there, you know, and people are going to present it to you, but it doesn't nullify the fact that you are still not going to see a lot of directors, even in a field such as healthcare, where you have more women, okay, on the over the board. But when you get to the C-suite, it just changes. It really just changes. And the fact that we're making these little strides now is what people use in conversation to shut you down when you want to establish the fact that the glass ceiling exists. And that's when people are being intellectually dishonest, because they know the truth, but they come to the table with big words to let you feel that the truth is in fact not real, or that it's just a mere opinion.
You're right. I agree with you. You're totally right. And you've used an industry where where you are in, and I'm in the energy space, oil and gas, renewables, and the likes. And that is totally correct. I was having a conversation with some other women in energy some weeks back, Selma Osiku and Jennifer Jumbe, and Selma said, "Bim, my very first events that I went to as a geologist, as a young geologist, fresh out of school, joined an oil company and went for this event in Cape Town. And my colleague, who was a white man, obviously, had to apologize to me. He said, Selma, you see, the thing is, over here, what you can see is the same stale, pale male. Yeah? I mean, if you look back to one of my the Women in Energy podcasts, you will see, or you will listen to that stale pale male. So I totally agree with you. The opportunity is there. Unlike the health sector within the energy space, there aren't enough women. There are women, don't get me wrong, they've always been women, but we are the minority. And I'm talking on a global scale now, not even in a specific area, not in the West, not in the East, the APAC or whatever, or not in Africa, but globally we are a minority. So I totally agree with you. And then in my company, without mentioning my company name, when you go to the people, I am literally on the top. And what that means is, hey, we hire Black people too.
Tokenism. Tokenism. Which is worse than the real problem.
Do you understand? Hey, we hire Black people too. I was having this conversation with my colleague yesterday, and I said, I have to start getting paid for this, because when people click on people, the first person they see is, obviously there's a representation of everyone, my white colleagues from different countries, and then there's me right at the top. And I'm like, it would be nice if my, money, my pay can reflect the fact that I'm number one here. Do you understand? So I hear you and I agree with you. Glass ceiling, does it even exist, and that, as you say, tokenism, that's also there. It's interesting. Efe, you've listened to us. What do you think, and what are your thoughts? You, number one, being a guy, number two, in the finance world, because my sister is in the finance world, and I know the pain of what she's gone through, wanting to break this so-called black ceiling, and which she has also done, but the challenges she keeps meeting and coming by on a daily basis. And now that she lives in Germany, started her own business, and even at that, there's still a lot to, she's a Black woman. But anyway, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think the proverbial glass ceiling exists, and I will speak to this from my own experience and perspective, and as an investment banker and all, So, the one thing I think many people who have any little familiarity with the investment banking world, especially on the advisory side of the business and M&A and all of those things, and maybe more less so on the trading side, is it's long hours, lots of travel, and all of those things, testosterone, right? And over the course of my career, there are two things that I noticed. One, because of the way the business is stacked up, right? Many times it's not the voice of reason that gets heard, it's the loudest voice, right? And so you would find that many people, if your style of engagement, you would become confrontational. More so if females, I noticed with realize that, what, the way to get ahead, you've got to be loud, alpha male type character and all of these things, and unfortunately start to, what's the word now, present that manner, and I think to an extent begin to lose themselves, But I remember having a conversation with a friend back when I was at one of the international banks, and she had just gotten, I believe, promoted to director or so. Yep. And we were having a conversation, and she struck me. She was like, this feels like the reward for years of agreeing to go to drinks with the boys on Friday nights after work and then come back to the office after drinks to continue the slog. Yeah? And just being available at the clock, to on more work, to shoulder more responsibility and all. But now it feels like because I'm asking myself, the time I spent, trying to be like the guys, trying to be with the guys, trying to be seen, could it have been spent doing much more beneficial things? Essentially, she didn't have a family, right? And it was something that was important to her, and she would have loved to have done that earlier. Yeah, and that's a sacrifice. And it brings me to the second point. Now, financial services, the way it's structured, right? Unfortunately, in parts of it, you have to be on the ball literally all the time. Yeah. And whilst we've got very generous leave allowances and all of those things, benefits, time off, paternity leave, maternity leave, and all of those things, unfortunately, I think women are a bit disadvantaged, and this is probably the same in a lot of other industries. Because so imagine you're a lady who over the course of 10 years has probably had 2 or 3 kids, which is not unusual, right? It means you've been out of the office for possibly 24 to 36 months. Automatically, for periods, right? If promotion cycles happened while you were off, chances that you would get promoted have automatically been diminished. Yeah. And this thing compounds. It compounds because the less people you have at senior levels with a voice and representing, let's say, a broader perspective of opinions, right? The more groupthink you're going to continue to have. So I remember listening on some show, I believe it's one of the Western states, and this lady, she's in healthcare. She just started a company focused on reproductive health. And what was one of the motivations for her? She said she saw some interview with the vice president and a few other people. They were discussing women's reproductive health, and there was no single woman in the room.
Wow.
Yeah.
And ridiculous as it sounds, it happens a lot. It's quite a frequent occurrence. Yeah. People trying to deliberate about another person's life that have no clue, on how the person's chances are stacked up. So yeah, that ceiling does exist. But I guess the question then is, there's a lot of conversation going on, right? I guess for me, the question now is, what should be, from an organizational perspective, how should organizations be even thinking about this thing, in the sense of what are the ends they want to be meeting, as against the tokenism that, we've got one black person, we've got one colored person, and all in certain positions. The fortunate thing is, when those things happen, right, many times people know. They know this is not just merit, right? Tick certain boxes.
Exactly.
Your colleagues know, and even deserve that position. It suddenly colors this thing, this good, And if you're not a strong person, strong character and all, it possibly, people begin to feel like imposters, and they don't meet up to the promise that you held in that position. So how should organizations be? What kind of should they be having? Because I'm also mindful of the fact that pump that.
But that's just it. They do know. And you know how we say in social commentary, people try to evade, dodge, or pretend that they don't know. I know we're going to move on to specifics such as sort of feminism and basically, or racism, and people say, well, what is that? Organizations know. They know about the glass ceiling. They know about the social determinants of behavior that would disadvantage a woman. All these are things that they're aware of. Mm-hmm. The manifestation of the glass ceiling exists because nobody wants to change the status quo, not because we don't believe it should be changed. So what am I saying? If we want to do it differently, we're going to address equality in a different way. We're going to look at the amount of time. So when you want to assess this, women, they sacrifice so much, right? That they don't take the maternity leave, that they don't take all that. Most times, they still find themselves telling you the story that your friend is telling you, right? So she might make it, but she's had to have this sacrifice. The fact is, it's not put into the system. No one is admitting that equality and sameness are not the same thing. People are basically going back to the argument that for us to be able to restructure this, for us to be able to correct this, equality can only happen when sameness is the situation between man and woman. Need not be like that. It need not be like that at all. So HR knows, organizations know what they need to do in order to make sure that people don't earn a third of what the other person does that does the same thing. But they're going to perpetuate the ignorance because it's the same thing that we do when something untoward happens and they ask the token black person to come and talk to them how a black person should be treated. You know how I should be treated. I ought not to be treated differently, So what is this? And this is what I keep saying, because, as individuals, we can check ourselves, but somehow we find it difficult to check organizations. In 2021, they cannot possibly come and tell me that, what should we be doing to make sure that women are okay? Whatever it is that you think I need, whatever it is I have expressed that I need, let's start from there. Let's start from the fact that I don't have to pretend to be a man before I'm heard. Let's start from the fact that I don't have to be seen to do anything extra apart from what I'm putting to the table. And if I am going to be treated differently, let us be able to come and say it with our chest that you cannot have this position because this and this. Most times organizations mislead you by thinking that there are other reasons why certain things cannot be the outcome. And it is in that dishonesty that people get frustrated. It is in that dishonesty that people think there needs to be something else in order to achieve a particular outcome or deny its existence altogether.
Right. Interesting. So much passion in this topic. Obviously, why not, right? And speaking of which, the things that we go through, the things that we see, as women to start with, and then as women of color, a term that I'm getting used to. Women of color, women of no color. I don't know what that means, but anyway, we move.
Pigmentation, rosy cheeks, ebony queen, black girl magic, and all of that.
I know, right? We move.
but one thing that has always amazed me is how creative these guys get with all of this acronyms.
I know.
BIPOC.
It is crazy. It's crazy.
The one I hate is that BAME. What is that?
BAME. Yeah, exactly. BAME. I'm like, wait, what? BAME? Go on.
The only thing I can think of every time I hear a new acronym is that this actually is the very definition of discrimination when you need to differentiate something from another.
Yeah.
What happened to human?
Oh, exactly.
I don't know. Is that because they want to label it so that at least we can face it? Because human is clearly not human, because we find ways to show each other up anyway.
Sure.
It might be slightly reductive.
But it's more your former point. It's labels.
Mm-hmm.
And I think labels, they serve a good purpose, right? You want to know, so if this is acid, I want to know how I should act around it. And how I should use it. But on the other hand, it also helps me know that, okay, this is something dangerous, and if I've got some vile intent, I know where to go. Now, take that to this conversation we're having around, color, women, and all of these things, right?
Yeah.
I think those labels, they've somehow, indirectly, maybe unintentionally, fuel the tokenism that, has become very rife. Because once imagine you go to a boardroom and then they're reeling out stats and say, we've got 4 women on our senior management team, blah, 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 and all of these things. 2 of them are, let's use Banke's new word, 2 of them are in the BAME category, right? So,
yeah.
It's a global world, right? And maybe this board is comprised of people from different parts of the world and all. Before then, they only saw you as Banke and Bimbo. Of course, they say interesting names, but they've probably not been able to put a face to it. But immediately, this label is emphasized. Certain things are triggered in their head. They now have to think about you in a certain way. If they're nice people, they now have to be differential to you. They now have to be cautious about what they're saying to you, on a base level.
Sure. But I think that's our responsibility to an extent, where we need to move away from being happy just about the words people use and the acronym people use. Like I always say to you, Ife, when you're in conversation, right, if you don't let people get away with not answering questions or not saying what they mean by hiding behind big words, you shouldn't accept it in acronyms either. You should really think about, what does this actually mean for me? And until I think the people of ethnic minorities start to really ask these questions and see how things manifest, we won't move away from it. Because tokenism is only perpetuated when we let the story stop with the fact that we see a black face or the fact that we see a woman. Really and truly, how is that organization growing forward? What are the things that they're doing to make sure it's sustained? How is it that we're dealing with the prejudice? Because you can legislate all sorts of things, but you can't change how people feel. And until you truly engage with people and take things to the basics, you never really see how they feel about issues, and you can't make any lasting changes. You can use data, you can use all the data points you think you do, you fix the problem there, and the aesthetics look amazing. But you don't engage people at the very basic level to get to the bottom of how they feel. And that's why we never change the trajectory of things. And we always look at the surface level and we go back to how things would be. We need to take responsibilities to really see how principles are manifested, how the portfolios and everything they say is, carried on through the ranks. And if you're the BAME person, what's your responsibility to making sure that you're not just there to fulfill a quota?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Most times you find these people are even stopping people like themselves to rise, because as long as I fulfill the quota, that's it, it's done.
There's that too. And still speaking on about acronyms, the one that pops to my head is, and with all due respect to Americans that will be listening to this podcast, is the African American bit. African Americans, they are tired of being labeled African Americans, because
what do they want to be called?
They just prefer to be called Black Americans, no? Because that's what they are. And then again, it's an issue of, okay, why are you calling me Black? But you are. If you're Black, you're Black. Let's not even get into the one drop syndrome or whatever. I call it, it's a syndrome. That's what I call it, because it's
but
just,
they also say you're not Black, right? You know that in America, you are also not Black. You are African.
Okay. Or you're, well, yeah, I mean, maybe that's also there, I don't know. Do you understand? Now, the Africans that come from Africa, they tend to say, we are African Americans, or, I'm Nigerian American, I'm Ghanaian American, and all of that. And then you have the ones that, got there because their forefathers were, moved there, based on the situation back in the day. Then they begin to feel like, so you feel you're better than us. Because you're African, you're better than us, and then everyone is just lumped into that same name of African American. And then back to BAME, right? Black and ethnic minority, which I think that's what it means. Then you have those that are not Black people. And this is I almost felt like this is a European thing or more like a UK thing, because it's in the UK that you just hear it every time. Bang, 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 bang. And it's something apparently a lot of Black people probably, I shouldn't say lots of, because I don't know, but quite a number of Black people don't really appreciate it. And why? Because the other ethnic minorities tend to behave or tend to even demonstrate that they are better than you who is Black. Do you understand?
Right.
So you have all of those things, and it's just it's just tiring.
So you want us to go back to human, the label human. That works?
If only life was so easy, yeah?
But I think we always need categories, and I think I agree with Efe in the fact that it does help us to manifest our prejudice, because when we were younger in England, they would always separate us into groups at school. This goes back into the acronyms as well as the glass ceiling. So from a very young age, they determine whether you will be in the foundation level, intermediate level, and the higher level. Now, if you're in the foundation level, the highest grade you would get is a D or a C or something. Basically, what this classification does is it predetermines your destiny from year 9 and year 10. So you basically figure out who's going to go to do A levels and go to university and who isn't. So that's what happens when categorization occurs. And if it occurs and you give the person doing the categorization the authority to determine people's destinies, because if you get it wrong, it's wrong, right? Yeah. So really and truly, if the acronyms are not serving us, if they're not bringing us back to the table of equality, then we're just deceiving ourselves. And if BAME is not liked by Black people or ethnic minorities, who coined it? Who is perpetuating it?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, totally. Anyway, we could spend the whole day on this particular topic, really, or this particular point, rather. But I have something that I think is quite interesting for us to get into, and that's hypergamy. So for me, I say hypergamy. Well, why not? Why not, if not? This is, and I want us to come back some other time to even talk more on hypergamy, but I'm very interested to hear what we can talk about on it today. I mean, again, I don't know if this comes from the whole glass ceiling situation, breaking glass ceilings for women, blah, blah, blah. Why can't a woman decide, okay, I'm fine as it is, but I would like to be with someone who is more than I am, or I feel is more than I am, has more economic means than I do. And then possibly it becomes a case of, so she thinks she's better than us. She wants to be with men that are better than us and things like that. So Banke, what are the unspoken dating rules in the Nigerian context?
Well, I don't know about Nigeria, but I know about Darwin's evolution theory. It's simple, right? See, it's so interesting.
Like you're a stubborn one, honestly.
I know. I really do apologize. But you know why I tend not to argue with people about certain things? Because people know, in my language, they say, people know when a fact is fact, right?
Yeah.
They just really want you to dance around with it, because really, women are physiologically programmed to make sure that they're going to find a partner that is the most viable, so that offspring will be good. It's a very simple nature story that shouldn't be debated. Now, when you want to cloud it in all things fancy and politically correct and suitable for 2021, I understand how this topic can get really fancy. Now, based on the fact that a woman is programmed to do that, it's not just about social status for me. It's about genetics. It's nice that you have good dentition. It's nice that you still have your hairline when you're beyond 50. As superficial as it may be, it stems from really solid facts that would help me determine whether or not that you're going to be a good mate for me. And it's not just a one-way situation. A man wants to know if I can carry a child, and modern day people will be like, oh, well, why are you going for men that are better and this, and why should men only choose women that are slim and blue-eyed and pretty? Every environment has its own beauty standards. But it's not just about beauty and wealth. Hypergamy basically means that you want a situation where you are choosing a mate that you deem to be superior, to be good for you. If you feel that that's not inclusive enough and we're not catering for all women, because then high value women and high value men are all going to go out and people are marrying up. If you have a problem with that, then you have a problem with nature. Then you're basically asking me to come to a debate in which I'm going to go against nature. And that's fine if it's going to make it sound more politically correct. But I have no problem with it. And I think that it's only because people look at it from an economic point of view. They look at it as, okay, women are looking for rich men. And that is true, because rich men mean they can put food on the table. They can put a roof over my head. The problem here is people don't want to say what they mean and mean what they say. People have a problem with sounding funny. I don't have a problem with sounding funny. I don't have a problem with hypergamy. And I think that if women want to do that, they can choose to do that, but you also have to come to the table correct. You know what I mean? Because the man, you know how we say, is your spec your spec? Because you say you're looking for high value men. You think he's going to look for someone that looks like they're disease ridden, or they're not going to be able to come to the outcome that he chooses as well. So it's a match thing, and everyone is trying to put their best foot forward. There's absolutely nothing wrong with a woman seeking to be with a mate that is viable and that is the creme de la creme.
Good point. Efe.
Yeah. I think, frankly, I see nothing wrong with it, right? We all have freedom of. However, I guess the one point that's also important to raise in this is, at every point in time, right, regardless of social status, economic status, health, whatever it is, we're all optimizing for something at every point in time. And in this context of hypergamy, as Banke has put it, it could be health considerations, economic considerations, social considerations, whatever it is, But for people who, as a woman who's going to be deliberate in this manner, I think one thing that minds is that whatever it is we're optimizing for, our motives will always be questioned. Yeah? And I guess that's where some of the backlash comes, that then family members are, couldn't you have done better? What does she want? And then it's not coming in our part of the world yet, but then you now start having talks about prenup agreements and all of those things, But right. And what I even say to people is, if the family insists on a prenup, you should not be offended by it. They're quite.
Yes.
I think it's human. That it's two sides to the coin. Your motives are being questioned. It's human, and it's what it is. And I guess it goes to what we had spoken earlier. In terms of the freedoms to express our own choices and the responsibility that comes with it.
Yeah. And honestly, the problem with hypergamy, Efe and Bimbo, it's always the gatekeepers of womanhood, and it's always the women. The internalized misogyny that comes with this is the problem. So if you notice, whenever we have these discussions, it's never the men having a problem with the fact that women want to choose this. Men have other problems. They're worrying about social climbing, because there are things that are worse than hypergamy. There are the fact that people have lost their values in building proper relationships because they're too busy networking, as I call it. You know what I mean? Marrying someone viable is one thing. I can live with that. What I can't live with is a grown man going to build relationships based just solely on what he can get, and going to churches, and that's another conversation altogether. So if I want to get mad, I have enough material to get mad over on that segment. But for this one, I think it's always the women. And when I didn't know better, I remember 10 years ago, I was doing my nails somewhere, and I was like, I can't bear not working. And then let people choose what they want to do. Okay, just face your choice. If someone is choosing to be a stay-at-home mom and they want to marry a billionaire, and that's a choice they're not ashamed to hold forward and stand by, let that be. Don't project the fact that you don't like that because you can't do it onto me. That's on you. So I think really and truly, whatever position we have on these topics, we need to be true to it. Why do you have that position? What informs that? What place is it coming from? Is it coming from a place of you think this is good for the environment, this is bad for the environment, this is morally corrupt, or the fact that you just hate the fact that you would love to choose that, but you're too bothered about looking good to make that choice? You know, because it might not look like you've used your degree to a great way if you're going around looking for a rich man. Try get the rich man first. Is it easy? You know what I mean? It ain't easy. I've been trying to catch a rich billionaire Russian for a while and I'm still at it. So it ain't easy.
You just need to move to Russia. A lot of oligarchs there.
There is that. But you get me, right?
I mean, I can send you some Russian courses to help you in conversation, and
you haven't even helped yourself, darling. Help yourself first.
I'm investing in this enterprise.
And you want to cut, right? No, I remember you. Of course you do. Of course you do. But yeah, no, we can never have honest conversations about certain things, and I think hypergamy is one of them. People don't want to stand by what they see.
Interesting. And this takes me to the last thing I'm going to talk about, the last point rather, and that is feminism. What does it mean to an African man, Ife?
You have to start with me. You know, I
this was our first fight when we first started becoming friends. So yeah, let him have it.
I feel like a goalkeeper who's been caught flat-footed and the ball is in the goal already.
Go on.
Okay. So, I'll say to me, but I'm African, so maybe this could be representative for a number of people. I think for me, feminism, for me, it's about equality. Yeah? I was going to say should be about equality, but I thought that's just going to get me down a rabbit hole. It's about equality, right? What men can get, can obtain, can be, can strive to, without anyone questioning their motives. It should be the same for women. I think that's how I like to think about it.
Banke is laughing, so I think Banke probably, I don't know. I mean, like you said, both of you had this you had this conversation. So Banke is just picturing something that you may have said that is different from what you're saying now. So.
Oh, obviously. And I'm going to put her words right back to her. You've got a right to evolve.
Absolutely, darling. Absolutely. No. Jokes apart, honestly, this was an opportunity for us, actually. You know, I'm gonna actually give him a lot of credit here. I think when years ago now, you know, the only way you really know and check your own biases is from conversation that is true. And I think with certain topics, it's very difficult because, you know, you're having it in social spaces, you're often playing to the gallery. There is that bit of motivated reasoning to get people on your side. There's also sounding right and, you know, not wanting to sound like that you're a bigot. But his definition is true. And I think most challenges that I had, if included, with people is we could never get past I don't know. Nobody seems to know what feminism means anyway. If you ask them, they all have different definitions. And I'm like,
different definitions, exactly.
Yeah, I was like, why do we why is the conversation going towards the confusion that other people might have? Why can we not start from the very core of how you understand it? Then when we did, like he said, right, it's about equality. You find that people never disagree about that core. When they complain about not knowing what it means, it's just a distraction, because intrinsically they do. They get it. They know it's equality. They know it's about this. And some of them are even elevated to know that it's not an argument for sameness. Now, the challenge is when you ask them, do they believe that men and women should have equal rights? I mean, in themselves, do they believe it? Then they start to stutter. Then the argument for sameness gets in the way. And half of the time, they don't believe it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But first, we must come to what you truly feel. Because if we don't, then we're forced to be asking you to do what you don't really agree with. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So sometimes you find that people are okay to think that, yes, we do, men and women should have equal rights. Sometimes they don't think we should have equal rights. And then that can form how you progress in that conversation with that person. Now, I think we've lost Ife. I think I should wait for him for this next thing I want to say.
Yeah, we lost him. He must have had a call coming or something. Okay. Hopefully he can get back in.
I think we should wait, because the next bit is really how that belief manifests itself, and it would change everything. So it's either you believe in equal.
There he is. Yeah.
Ife, are you back?
Yeah, I miss some of the good things you were saying about me. Yeah.
No, darling. No.
Yeah.
Never.
Go on, Banke.
Okay. So where was I? I was saying about that distinction between like being able for people to come to the table as to how they truly feel. So if there's agreement on the equality of men and women that they deserve equal rights, then you can progress to asking that person, how does this manifest? How would they expect it to manifest? We can go to equal pay, equal rights, me being able to, to have gender roles that are, blah, blah, blah. But first, you must be able to come with your chest and tell me that you don't believe that women and men should have equal rights. And that too will be fine. So I think my struggle with feminism and people's interpretation and people's debates and position on it has been that intellectual dishonesty that we keep going on about. People just don't have the chest to say that they don't believe in the equality of men and women when it comes to access to rights, access to trade, access to profession. It doesn't matter whether they have daughters or mothers, by the way. And I don't think that it's a case of trying to judge someone, but you can't move and have meaningful conversations or relationships for that matter when people refuse to say what they mean and mean what they say. And that's my problem with it. So they distract themselves with, there's several waves of feminism, or feminists are always angry. Because now you're conversing with me. I'm married. I'm pretty girly. There's not a lot of things for me to be upset about in life. Yet I'm very vocal about feminism. And that really disturbs them to the point where they say, well, what's your problem anyway? But that's just it. You would rather I'm angry. You would rather I was single, and you rather question my sexuality. Perhaps I'm a lesbian, I can't get a man. Then you'll be able to, discard whatever it is I've got to say. But no, I don't have all of those quirks for you to focus on, nor am I confused about the definition of feminism. So we can now focus on your own cognitive dissonance, if you may. And that's where you need to start with people. And that's where conversation can progress. And that's what we've done.
Awesome. Thanks, Banke. Ife.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I hear Banke, and I think she's spot on. But as a guy, I think also, and from the early conversations I used to have with Banke around this thing, I think there's a lot of intellectual dishonesty around this topic on both sides, even amongst women. Yeah. Okay. And you know how it is where your first experience of a thing colors the way you think about it and engage going forward, right?
Yeah.
I think that there's a little bit of that has happened, as with all.
So thank God you met me then, right?
Oh yeah, thank God I met you.
Banke, let him. Go on, Ife.
You
He's
know?
lost his thought now.
I've lost my thought again. So yeah, I'll say. So your very first experience of it, I think, colors the way you engage with it going forward, right? And I think, unfortunately, for many people, women and men alike, I think they've come across or only been exposed to perhaps what I'd call the toxic forms of feminism, right? And because of that, it is colored every conversation you want to have with them around this topic, you know.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the topics that I would say that definition does matter and at the same time doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, because the base thought is very simple. Do you agree that men and women should have the same rights, the same access, the same opportunities and everything? Do you? And we should leave it at that, right?
But that's a very difficult thing, though, Efe. That question is so difficult for people to answer truthfully.
I know, exactly. So let's start from that base, right? Let's forget. That's why I said, on the one hand, the label does matter, and on the other hand, it doesn't. You know. So first of all, let's think about it first principles. This is the point of departure. It's equality for both sexes, right? And then, if you want to get into knots and twists around how
it manifests,
it's toxic, how it manifests, all of those, and then fine. Let us now define and label it properly. You know, but
and I think that's where it gets juicy, you know, when you tell people to show you how they manifest their position, whether they agree or they don't. And
Correct.
That's when they truly feel, okay, maybe I don't belong in this category. Maybe I do like it. Maybe I don't like it. You have to drive it home.
Yeah, and the other thing I was going to say, you know, I think, look, it is pretty, on a base level, in many parts of the world, is difficult being a woman.
Yeah.
Right? It's difficult being a woman. And I get that, I understand that, I appreciate that, you know, I admit that, you know. But what I always say to a number of my female friends is, you see, I think the French, they've got this, whatever, they say, noblesse oblige. So nobility imposes obligations. If you're from the aristocracy or from a king or whatever it is, you've got an obligation to take care of the peasants in your kingdom or your subjects and all of those things, right? Because you're seemingly on a higher level. And as if to women, you are coming from this point that, we want equality and everything, you know. Unfortunately, a greater burden rests in your lap, for people to understand where you are coming from. So you cannot afford to provide distractions. You know, once your rhetoric begins to seem like anti-man or anti-male, anti-masculine, you suddenly detract. Instead of you explaining what you mean by equality, right? You suddenly have to defend and explain the fact that, no, I'm not against men, I'm not against this, you know. All of those things are distractions. You know, and it's very easy to get into that rabbit hole.
We have to be careful here, because this is akin to how people say, you know, as a Black person, you're the one looking for equal rights, so you better be nice to Massa so that he doesn't get upset by your quest. And really and truly, if we want to be very honest, as much as I agree with you, I don't think you should be an angry person anyway, whether or not you're fighting for equal rights or not. But I think to really then say that the approach of how a person approaches feminism is enough reason for us to pretend not to get it is the reason why we're always here at this point. People really know that just because you're a woman doesn't mean you still have to fight to be treated nicely. You know, whether or not she's screaming on top, it would be nice if she's amiable. But the fact that she isn't enough reason for us to keep pretending that we don't know what's right. You know, but for me, I get it. I think as a man, you guys have it tough, because I also think one of the problems with feminism and its trajectory is because it's traveling along the same lines of the male identity crisis. I think that our men really now don't really know what day it is. Basically, feminism is challenging the privilege that you've always known, right? So all of a sudden,
I do agree with you, Banke.
Do you know what I mean? Right?
Yeah, this is something I see a lot. excuse me, in Scandinavia. You know, based on my experience living there as well. Yes, it does challenge the man's, you know, sort of status quo. What's the man's privilege, basically? What has always been something that is, oh, it's us. This is what we do. Blah blah blah. Yeah. But you know, and then you have the women liberation situation, and then the man starts to feel like, okay, well, if she can do it, then why should I? Do you understand? So I hear both of you, you know, on the point of, you know, one has to be careful in terms of how one sees it. Is, you know, is something feminist or is it not? Is it going to be perceived in this way, in a certain way, or is it not? Yeah. And some people will listen to Chimamanda Adichie's definition of feminism, and they would even throw a fit to say, "Oh my God, what is she on about?" You know, blah blah blah. You know, oh, she only talks about this to push her agenda. Every time she has a book to sell, then she becomes a feminist. You know, so it's. I
think we should always ask people why they're angry about the terminology, because for me, I say we should entertain and let people identify with this male identity crisis that is also always going to be a thorn in everything you want to do to move feminism forward. But we shut men down. We don't let them really express their difficulty in this new adjustment. Now it has to share its space with me. You know, it has to now not be the dog's bollocks all the time. It has to share professions. It has to share, you know, roles. And this is an adjustment that they have to make. And no one talks about it enough. And we just expect them to embrace feminism. So we're not really in truth, you know, with the whole discussion. So that's why you always get people fighting back and hating Chimamanda. I mean, how can you? But here we are.
Oh my days, guys, lady and gentlemen. Thank you so much. Honestly, we could go on. We will be here for 2-3 hours, you know. These points are really, they're topics on their own, and these are topics which we should actually, you know, come back, take just one of them, sit down and dissect it, you know, into pieces. So I really appreciate both of you. There's so much more to talk about, but we also have to be mindful of, you know, your day, you know, in your respective cities and countries where you are. I've thoroughly enjoyed every moment, and so much of a learning process for me as well. So thank you, Ife. Thank you, Banke. Thank you so very much. Thank you for
good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, of course you did. Yeah. I can't be both of you. I can't be both of you.
Oh Lord,
I can't with both of you. Well, a big thanks to our listeners. Trust me, Ife and Banke will be back. This is not the end. They will be back. So thank you guys for listening in, and please throw in your comments and let's know your thoughts on, you know, the points that we discussed today under the topic of intellectual dishonesty. So until next time, it's Beam from Blue Citron. Do enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are. Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye.